Hello and welcome to my channel. This video is about how I became fluent in German for free, and in this video I want to give you some tips on how you can do the same in the language of your choosing. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like for the YouTube algorithm and consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell for when I post future videos. Also, I post on Snapchat and Instagram in both English and German, so add me there if you would like to see that. So to start off, I started learning German as a teenager, but completed the German C2 exam, das Große Deutsche Sprachdiplom, for those of you who know it, at the age of 21. While there are many ways of becoming fluent in a foreign language, I think it's definitely a good idea to take a look at the most cost-effective ways of doing it before you throw money at a course or something and end up making your experience of learning that language too formalized and a bit too structured. At the end of the day, learning a language is very much a passion, and you want to keep it as intrinsically motivating as you can. So looking back, I sort of did this eventually anyway, but when I first started learning German, it was in school, in language class, and I very much saw that as a way of finally I'm going to be able to get the opportunity to start learning German. So after 3 to 4 years of learning German, I could barely hold a conversation, but in my 4th year of learning German, I got a buddy from Germany, and I remember the first proper conversation that I was able to hold with him was about religion and religious topics across Europe. And I remember I couldn't really say much, and all I was doing was answering his questions. But even though it wasn't that complicated, it was definitely really rewarding after the fact. From that moment on, I kept trying to find others to talk German to, as well as to that buddy. Then at university a few years later on, I volunteered to be a guide or like a buddy to German-speaking students, and that way I knew that when new students would come to the university, I would have the opportunity to meet them and then use more German. I was actually quite hard on myself though. I really didn't like making mistakes, so every time that I wanted to start a new conversation with someone, it took that little bit of courage. But after the fact, I always felt like I came away with something that I hadn't known before the conversation. So coming back to what I said about passion a few minutes ago, so my German actually really improved the most when I was doing it out of passion. So the classes were definitely good to have to learn sort of the grammar and stuff like that about German, but they were definitely not the reason why I continued on to C2 level fluency. That came from exploring and challenging myself in German. I would say it probably started with that first conversation, and after that I knew that I could, speak to someone in a foreign language, so I sought out more people to do that with. Then once I knew I could talk about everyday things, I wanted to talk about more challenging things. So I would talk about, politics, or what is it like in Berlin, or what are the differences between German culture and maybe some other culture, or what somebody's thoughts were. And it very much became, I'm using the German language to learn more of the things that I'm interested in. I would say at this point my German took off. It literally just went from being something that I had learned out of fun to being something that I could use not only to still be fun, but also to ask the questions that I was interested in, learn the things that I was interested in. I genuinely feel that the most important thing in learning a language is just to speak, to seek out those people who you want to talk to and talk to them. And I really do feel like this should be the most important thing to focus on. So like I said before, for me, classes were great for understanding grammar, but if you think about it in terms of the actual time used on a class, like 40 to 60 minutes, versus time used on a conversation, on something that you want to understand, in those 40 to 60 minutes, you'll learn so much about what you wanted to learn. You'll make connections in the language that you probably wouldn't have learned otherwise, and definitely not as quickly. You'll have questions answered that you wanted answered, and in the end you'll come away with way more than you had at the outset of that conversation. And looking back, if I actually think about it in terms of the time used to learn the language in, like, say, a class setting versus speaking, after all of the grammar is learned and, you know, you're just focusing on things that you could learn by yourself, if you were to take the time for a 40-minute class or like an hour class versus 40 minutes of speaking to someone on a topic that you're interested in your foreign language, believe me, you will come away with so much more of your questions answered, so much more of your interest followed up on, so much more courage to do it again. You'll just feel a lot better about having invested that time, and it won't even have felt like investing time in the end. It'll just have been something that you enjoyed and you can be proud of after the fact. So then the next question is, how do you go about finding people to talk to in your target language? So there are essentially two ways that you can do this. You can either do this virtually or in person. If you want to do it virtually, you can take a look at apps like Tandem and Discord. There you can find people to talk to in your target language, both learners and native speakers. You could also look into finding a Skype group. Here you'd be able to Skype with people in your target language and just getting that conversation practice virtually. And then in terms of in-person meetups, you could look at your local university, or maybe through your school, or maybe just if you look online, you might be able to find a group that meets regularly from the country where your target language is spoken. At the beginning, it's hard and it's daunting, but before meeting someone, just put together a few sentences that you want to use when you're talking to the native speaker and put them into practice. This way, you'll definitely have something to practice and be able to get a conversation started. You will always come away with more than you began with. Be it pronunciation, be it just a different way of saying the same thing, or even just a correction from a native speaker. All of these things will help you in your next conversation. And if you keep doing that, that will snowball you to fluency. So that is pretty much it for this video. I hope I was able to get the point across that you don't want to focus too much on formalizing your language learning, but rather on making it fun and focus on speaking as much as you can. If you enjoyed this video, please do leave a like there for the YouTube algorithm. It really does help my channel. And consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell for when I post future videos. Bis zum nächsten Mal.